Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Health Pioneer, and this is Dr. Asta Visain. So today in this session I wish to discuss on a very sensitive topic, yet one of the most important ones we actually deal with, and that is mental health, more specifically anxiety. So I want to begin with laying down the foundation of what anxiety really is. Because unless until we understand anxiety to that depth, to that level, we cannot be sure whether we are dealing with anxiety at an abnormal level or we're just stressed out at a very normal level that doesn't even need attention. So, the first thing I wish to do is define anxiety in a very basic language so that we have a better understanding of the term. The second thing I wish to lay out here is when is anxiety very normal to experience, because there is something called a healthy anxiety. So, not all examples of anxiety is abnormal, not all experiences of anxiety needs treatment. My aim next will be to point out how anxiety affects a person at their individual level, which means anxiety in its experience is so diverse, it's so diverse that what one person might be experiencing is never going to be the same as what somebody else experiences, even though both of those conditions can be anxiety. The next thing I want to highlight is the importance of your personal starting point. What I mean by that is what triggers anxious thoughts in you personally. Again, it does not have to match with somebody else's starting point. Your trigger point, your symptoms, your situations of what triggers anxiety is completely independent of what triggers the same in somebody else. Now, briefly, I will discuss a technique that you can apply on yourself at home to see if it eases the anxious thoughts and behaviors, and that technique is called assess, plan, and act technique. It is a very simple method you can try on yourself. It will give you a better understanding of where your anxiety stands on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the worst experience you're having with your anxiety. And lastly, I'll be discussing on when is it the right time to seek for help. So, when do you feel you should go for medical help? You should contact a healthcare professional or a mental healthcare professional. We will highlight certain situations where it is possible to self treat yourself or self help, um, with certain exercises that you can do at home, versus when the situation is so out of control or so complicated that a professional will be better able to help you. So, are you anxious right now? I won't be surprised if you are. My point is, everybody faces anxiety, everybody feels worried, everybody feels stressed out in their day to day life. It can be about their health, it can be about their finances, about their family, or anything that they're going through in their life. In fact, when we hear stories of strangers, of their struggles, their sad stories, even those can induce anxiety in us. It's such an unavoidable emotion. We cannot be immune from it. And fortunately, we shouldn't be immune from it because it is such a crucial emotion to have. It is important for our survival because it prepares us to, deal with unexpected situations, to figure out challenging tasks, solve problems. It is so crucial when you're trying to meet a deadline, when you're trying to prepare for big exams, that nervousness, that anxiety that you feel at that moment, it is essential for your performance on that particular task. But the point that needs to be highlighted here is that anxiety should be of an optimal level. So, what is an optimal level of anxiety that we hear from everybody? Optimal level of anxiety is something that is enhancing our performance, not hindering it. So when you're too occupied with anxious thoughts, or you're worried about almost everything that you do in your daily life. You feel your life is out of control. You feel helpless and hopeless. That is when anxiety is abnormal. It has crossed the optimal level. And that is when you actually need to seek medical care. That is when you contact a mental health care professional. So, I want to begin by very basically describing what anxiety is. I do not wish to overcomplicate it with difficult word meaning games here. So, some of the words that I think actually describe anxiety are words like I'm fearful or dreadful or I feel uneasy. These are the words that express anxiety more accurately. Now, if you question where does your anxiety come from, so some general most common answers are that you don't want to feel hurt, you don't want to be judged by others, you don't want to feel rejected by someone, you don't want to stand out in a crowd, you want to belong. And this feeling of wanting to belong or wanting to have everything under your control, to the point that you don't want things to be uncertain to you, you want to be prepared for everything that's coming in your life. That's where anxiety comes in. Now, what are some of the situations when this anxiety is actually completely normal to feel, or so called healthy anxiety? When do we experience that? So, some of these situations or some of the examples where anxiety is completely normal or is actually essential to feel. So, when you're preparing for big tests and exams, or when you're trying to meet a tight deadline, or you've just heard a sad news and you're trying to cope with it, or you've just lost a job or trying to overcome financial hurdles, waiting for big results or big announcements, all the nervousness, all the anxious thoughts that you feel in these situations is actually a part of healthy anxiety. This is not something that is abnormal. This is not something that needs to be treated. So, the next important aspect that I want to address is the question of how anxiety affects you at a personal level. Remember that I mentioned earlier that how you experience anxiety is not going to be the same as how somebody else is going to experience anxiety. So, it is obvious that anxiety has a very negative impact on you, but it has two very strong components. One is the emotional aspect, which we might be aware of, but there also a physical component to it, which might not be so obvious to some of us. So, the emotional aspect involves using sentences like, I tend to worry all the time. I cannot control my thought processes. I over obsess myself for some of the things. I hate or I dislike being the center of attention. I'm scared to feel rejected. I'm scared to feel hurt. Um, I don't want to be a part of a huge gathering. I feel nervous to connect with other people. All these are emotional aspects of feeling anxiety. Now, there is also a physical component. So, you might be eating a lot due to stress, which is called stress induced overeating, or you might be eating too little because you're feeling so anxious. Then you might be having a very poor quality of sleep, so you're going to feel very tired throughout the day. You'll feel very fatigued, or you won't have any energy to deal with. You'll have dry mouth, because uh, anxiety is something that is activating our body, because it's activating our sympathetic nervous system, or the fight or the flight response that is more commonly known as. So you might be sweating a lot, you might be peeing a lot, you might have severe episodes of diarrhea, you might have fast and shallow breathing, which can cause chest tightness and muscle tension. All those are the obvious physical symptoms of anxiety, which needs to be looked at by a doctor if these symptoms have lasted for more than a week, up to 2 to 3 weeks. That's when it is recommended that you consult healthcare professional. to relieve these symptoms. And last but not the least fact, how anxiety affects you. Anxiety does not affect you alone. It definitely affects everybody that you're connected with. So, your family members, your colleagues, your co workers, you name it, everybody that you're connected with is somewhere going to be experiencing the negative impact of your anxiety. So it is best that you understand what your anxiety is, how you are affected by it, and what you can do about it. So that brings me to the next line of question that I want to ask, which is again very personalized. And that question is, what is your starting point? That means what triggers anxiety in you personally. I'm not trying to compare you with anybody else. Your level of anxiety, your threshold, your standardized bar, what causes anxiety in you, what triggers you, is very much independent from the factors that causes anxiety in somebody else. So what is your starting point? So what are your thoughts, behaviors, situations that trigger anxiety in you? So, what I would suggest is pen it down. Just sit with the paper, make a list of all the thoughts, behaviors, you know, any situation that triggers you, make a list of those. And from that list, you will actually end up realizing what triggers you. And what you might do is try to minimize anxiety or try to control the thoughts and behaviors the next time you encounter them, so that your level of anxiety slowly and gradually reduces. And then, next, when you've made a list of all those symptoms and behaviors and thoughts and everything that seems problematic to you, sit down and reflect on each of those points. Why are they coming up? From where are they coming up? How are they arising? And what you can do about each and every single point, so that the next time you're having an anxiety episode, or you're feeling anxious, or you are feeling nervous, you know exactly what to do, how to do. You can plan yourself and hopefully reduce the level of anxiety that you face at that time. So, my next point here is to briefly discuss a technique that I mentioned at the beginning, and that is called the assess, plan, and act technique. So, basically, what you do here is you assess what's causing or what's triggering you or your anxiety. So, you take a situation that you're really nervous about, and you try to assess why that's causing nervousness or why that leads to anxiety, what makes you uncomfortable about that situation, why do you try to avoid that situation. Just write it out or make a note of it in your mind, the reason behind the anxiety or the trigger, what's causing it, why it's happening, and then write out a plan of what you can do about it. Can you talk to someone about it? Can you talk to your peers or your friends or your family members? Discuss on how you can actually resolve that anxiety, or how you can at least minimize it or work towards minimizing it. The small steps you can take towards minimizing it. How can you get rid of those anxious feelings that arise in that particular situation? Once you have that plan, sorted out, then you can act upon that plan. So make a list of to do actions in a priority list. So what is the first thing you need to do in order to minimize anxiety, and then what is the next step, or what leads to the next step, till you reach a point where you feel that okay, the anxiety that you were facing is at a very minimal level, something that is much under your control, something that is not needing immediate attention of a healthcare professional, for example. So, this is an example of a technique called assess, plan, and then act technique, which you can apply by yourself as you assess your symptoms, your behaviors, and your actions, and then figure out if that's helping you. If it has helped you, make a note of how it has helped you so you can apply that technique to some other situation that triggers your anxiety. Now, the last but perhaps the most important point that I wish to discuss in this video is when to seek help. When do you actually decide that you need professional help? So, there are two ways you can receive help. The first one is you help yourself. So, you find out resources that you try on yourself and see if it's helping you. So, you can go online, find several books, several workbooks, worksheets, work them out, learn things about yourself, apply new techniques and lessons, and see if you can help yourself. Now, that is beneficial when your symptoms or your anxiety level is mild to moderate, that can be controlled easily by yourself. But for more serious and complex problems or complex thought processes, or when you feel your life is completely out of control and there isn't much that you can do by yourself, that is when you actually seek medical care. So you talk to a healthcare professional or a mental health care professional. Especially make a note of some of the thought processes that you might be having. They are the red flags. Red flags meaning if those thoughts are arising in your mind, please immediately seek medical help. Now, examples of those thoughts are suicidal thoughts. That is the priority, that is the topmost, the most important thought we don't want people to think about. So, if you're having suicidal thoughts, that is an example of when you should seek medical care. Then you have things like you're hearing voices. Uh, there is something in your head telling you or asking you to do things that you don't wish to do. If you're feeling really disturbed for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks and nothing's getting better, that's when you seek medical help. If you're noticing that your weight is fluctuating a lot, so your eating habits are severely affected by your anxiety, that's when you want to seek help. And you feel you're just out of whack, out of control, nothing is in your hand, you're going towards depression from anxiety, and you feel there's nothing you can do to control it by yourself, that is when you seek medical care. So remember, what I have done in this video is only laid down the basic information of anxiety. So we have defined what anxiety feels like, how we should not compare our anxiety with somebody else's experience of anxiety. We have discussed how we can assess what triggers our anxiety, how we can minimize it, how we can use the assess, plan, and act technique to control some of our anxious thoughts. And lastly, and most importantly, when is it the right time to contact a doctor or receive medical care? And that is when things are getting out of control or you feel you alone cannot control your anxiety. But one thing I definitely want to highlight here is that feeling anxious is nothing to be ashamed of. It really is nothing to be ashamed of. It is very natural, it is very normal to be anxious, and it is also very normal to receive medical care when things are getting out of your hand. That's what we doctors are here for. And I definitely urge you to contact a medical health professional if you are struggling with anxiety, because you don't have to struggle with it. So please be mindful and do watch more videos that I will be bringing on later related to anxiety, um, to help you better understand the disorder